Here with Chaplain Ken Stice, who is with the Army Chief of Chaplains. And just please tell us a little bit more about kind of where you are and how your organization fits in with the rest of the Army, and then we'll get into a lot of details.
Sure. I'm a chaplain in the Office of the Chief of Chaplains, and I'm the director of a new directorate. We work with future operations, strategic integration with the Public Affairs Office, as well as future operations in regards to chaplain family ministries in terms of supporting our soldiers and families.
And is that something that there is a representative of your overall organization on every base or with every unit? How are they plugged in with the actual individual boots on the ground?
Well, chaplains and chaplain assistants are assigned down at the battalion level and the unit ministry team. That allows us to be part of the organization, therefore a lot of contact with the soldiers and the families. And then through successive ranks, we continue on with military organizations. We're assigned to the units. That's the best way to integrate and have access to the needs of their soldiers and their families and provide the ministry that's available. At the higher headquarters, we provide the supervision and the management of programs to make sure the delivery is fair across the installations of the services, as well as training of our chaplains and chaplain assistants in terms of specialized skills and abilities to provide that ministry to our soldiers and families.
So when you talk about ministry, is it denomination specific, or is there some just general chaplaincy issues that are non-denominational that people can come and talk to you about?
I would say both. We are endorsed by denominations when we join the services. Therefore, we represent those groups on active duty. But early on, we're trained and we provide a pluralistic environment where it's non-judgmental. Much of our services are provided in a faith-based environment, which meets the needs of our individuals with a spiritual component of what we consider in the Army comprehensive soldier fitness, where it's one of the critical elements to helping them maintain the resilience and ability to perform their mission.
One of the issues, I've talked to a lot of soldiers and have done a lot of research on military families and found that there is a big reluctance, and we'll talk about this more, but a reluctance to access mental health services, in part because I was in the Marine Corps and I remember hearing this constantly, pain is just weakness leaving your body kind of a thing, and we don't ask for help, and you don't want to be perceived, or maybe you'll lose your security clearance, even though the official DoD position is that that's not true anymore anyway. But do you find that you have to do something else to get people to come and see you, or is the privacy, the privilege, the confidentiality is something that makes it a little easier?
I think that's dependent upon the relationship the chaplain establishes within his unit. We have the confidentiality and the privileged communication under Uniform Code of Military Justice, which allows to reduce that stigma to make sure that the individuals have a safe environment in which to come and share their problems, of which we can work with them on the solutions to resolve those. The Army's done a lot to try and reduce that stigma across the board for behavioral health as well as for chaplains. I think it's the relationship because we're part of the unit. We have access to the soldiers. We're in the normal continuum of life cycle events for a soldier and his family, that we're a safer place to go. And then, of course, since we're skills-based and prevention-oriented, we help them attain the right kind of skills that help them to manage their relationships. So when they see that kind of success across with their peers within the unit, across the command, then that opens up the door for more individuals. I'd say probably the biggest deterrence for folks coming to see their unit chaplain would be the fear that maybe they're going to be preached at, that it's only going to be a faith-based situation. And once that's overcome by peers and other soldiers telling them, saying, no, that's not the way the chaplain is, they may provide that as an additional resource, but you don't have to worry that they're trying to get you into the chapel or get you into the church when you come to them for support and help.
One of the interesting programs that you've got, I found absolutely fascinating, the statistics about it is having to do with marriages, and that you're able to actually reduce divorces by 50%, and that has either a result through the divorce that also reduces suicide rates, but it probably also has just a direct result on suicide rates. Talk about those things. I think those are really terrific programs.
Well, what you're referring to is our Strong Bonds program, and that's a premier commander's program which chaplains execute, where we can take soldiers and family members at government expense away for an overnight retreat, as well as just a day away, and provide child care, meals, and curriculum. It's a vetted and proven curriculum that allows us to give the skills to the service members that help them to manage their relationships, particularly during times of stress. So if we know that relationship stress is a number one contributor to the suicide rate in the Army, we know that we need to target that and work better. even if folks aren't taking their own lives, which is always tragic. We want folks to have successful marriages to be able to be successful in their lives, whether they do their Army mission or not. So the 50% reduction in divorce rate is a limited study through University of Denver. We're in the third of a fifth-year study. I appreciate those metrics, but my long-range metrics would be the longitudinal study of folks who, after the military service of a 20-year career, stay married, successfully launch their children, have effective and good communication relationships with their children and their other peers after they leave military service and contribute now as private citizens.
You know, I want you to go back just a little bit because you said something I thought was very intriguing. That relationship stress is the biggest predictor of suicide. Is that correct? Is that even more so than PTSD, or what's now, I guess it's now becoming kind of called PTSI? But is that correct? That divorce is or relationship issues is the biggest predictor?
I wouldn't say it's the biggest. It is in majority of suicides that happen in the Army, relationship is one of the number one contributors. So the metrics of which we analyze every suicide in the Army, it's a painful process, but it's really important so that we look at where the things we should have caught and could have caught to save the next life. All those factors come into it. Relationship, in the majority of our suicides, relationship stress and failure and breakdown is a contributor. So it's not really fair due to the complexity of how those factors for each individual suicide come together to always compare. So let's just take a failed relationship of a soldier. It may not end in suicide, but it's something that needs to be addressed in terms of effective living skills, life skills for him to be able to perform his mission but also be successful in his life. If it's unaddressed and continues to go on, it will hamper him to be able to do his military mission, but also probably spill into the rest of his life. And if that's not worked with and helping him to get those life skills, then he's at risk for a lot of trouble and problems.
If we took just a typical military family where one of the parents, well, probably the dad in most cases, is deployed, and so you've got somebody who's thousands of miles away from the family, how is the Chaplain Corps working with that family? Are you working with the at-home folks and with the soldier in the field to help them to get going what they need to get going? And I'm asking because I've seen some of the research I've looked at, and just anecdotally also, is finding when the guys are connected, feel connected at home, feel that they're an important part of it, they're not walking into a strange environment when they come back, and the families are prepared for a different sort of guy than the one who left a few months before. And that can really help the integration process, which is also the relationship issue. But you got to be working on both ends at the same time.
So we do a lot of preparation before we deploy. Unfortunately, the ramp up to go down range in a unit requires a lot of time away from home those last couple of weeks and months. And then the predictability of when you actually depart is never solid, so that you're on a string back and forth for that last week, which is painful to the family and painful to the relation, certainly painful to children. So the pre-deployment actions contribute towards setting up the right environment where the family member is connected to the family readiness group and has peer support during the time of deployment. Some family members choose for many different reasons to go back to home where their parents may be for what they support. Some of those spouses have reported back to us that they wish they had stayed where the unit was, since the hometown probably wasn't as aware and connected to the cycle. The news information of what's happening with the unit downrange comes back to the rear detachment. So chaplains during the deployment at home station continue with rear detachment actions to include strong bonds retreats for the deployed service member and family while they're at home station with their children while they're separated. We talk about the reintegration well before they start to reintegrate, and then they take a marital assessment tool as part of the deployment cycle support. The DCS cycle helps them identify where they're at. We talk to the soldiers before we deploy back home and say, hey, this is not going to be an easy thing. If managing a separation is difficult, managing a reintegration is twice as difficult, because of the skills that the spouse has acquired during your time of separation. The battle handoff of some of that shared responsibility is not an easy thing to negotiate. So we've learned over the years from the success and failures, we learn from our mistakes individually as well as an organization, how to best help couples do that. And so the retreats and the interaction with soldiers downrange with our instruction and training. And then typically after the first phase of the deployment cycle support reintegration, after their block leave, then we will target those audiences with available resources in terms of retreats to say, okay, the honeymoon phase is over, because everybody's pretty excited at the ramp when you come off the plane and you see the family members. Soon after that, the expectation, the hard part of getting along and living together again and managing the parenting skills and accepting and all those, and that is regardless of whether or not an individual has PTSD or TBI or some other debilitating or conflicting medical condition. So add to that the layers of grief that soldiers also bring home after losing friends and battle buddies, and family members that have attended the memorial ceremonies back home. They have to talk about those kind of things, which are difficult. And the kids who now have children that have to move away from the unit of assignment because they lost their parent. All those kind of conflicting emotions, as well as there's a lot of important spiritual complications and truth that need to be delivered at that time to help them get through those phases. Chaplains in the mix, because they've been with the unit, redeploy, also go through their own reintegration. So we're concerned about our caregivers, and we're working on a care-to-caregiver campaign that makes sure we help with the resilience of our chaplains who are in the front, providing those sources to resources to families. And
I'm wondering how this would fit in with the whole confidentiality issue, but if you have a chaplain in the field who's working with an individual service member who's got issues that he has to deal with, and then you've got somebody at home working with the folks at home, is there an exchange of information between the two chaplains? Is that allowable, so that the one in the field could call the stateside person, or maybe they're in Germany or someplace else, and say, look, he's coming home and he's got this particular thing going on, or the other way around, to alert the young service member before he gets on that plane to come home that there are some things at home that he may need to know about?
Sure. I think the way we would normally proceed with that kind of concern by referral would be first talk to the counselee as a client and say, hey, do I have permission to share this with a chaplain in the rear? Not the specifics of what you've come to me, but just to say your spouse may need that, as well as in the other, it could go both directions. So the chaplain who's seeing a spouse at home should ask that spouse and say, hey, do I have permission to share with the unit chaplain that's forward deployed with your spouse to be able to talk to them about these issues and give them the heads up and alert and all those kind of things. Normally that works fine because they've already come to the chaplain for it's voluntary. Some of them are command referred in terms of you probably need to go see the chaplain. He or she is the right person to help you with those kind of services. But the confidentiality is the specifics of the counseling appointment that can't be violated. So it's not so much the professional referral. We can make professional referral among ourselves as clergy and counselors and chaplains, as well as to behavioral health if appropriate.
How do you handle issues facing the Guard and Reserve, who are quite often the only ones within their zip code possibly who have any sort of military connection? They don't have that on base. They don't have that same community. The kids have got issues where they may be the only child in the class, and kids and the teachers may have no idea how to deal with them or what they're going through. They need services as well, but they may not have quite the same sort of access. Is there a way that they can reach out to you guys, or maybe they get it online, or some other way that folks who are not quite as geographically connected can get what they need to get?
I would say probably we execute the team of teams approach, where everybody's a partner together to help those families of our Guard and Reserve service members. Specifically, just today during the family forum, I heard from different educators in the family forum panel and talking about what is done for our Guard and Reserve families and the outlying stations and things like that. Specifically, the chaplain still provides strong bonds retreats through our Guard and Reserve units. There are some unique strengths that come from Guard assignment because of long-term association with particular brigade, growing up through the ranks. That allows for better networking among peers and family members. Typically can live in the same town for a long time, so they have better social network that maybe our active duty service members don't enjoy when they transfer between installations. But it is a challenge. It is a challenge because there is the definite possibility that they could remain isolated, unconnected after the deployment. So Operation Yellow Ribbon is being executed across the state lines that helps make sure the civilian agencies are alerted and aware of the return. Usually is good support from the community with regard to a welcome home ceremony, parade, those kinds of events. As long as that team of teams is executed where they're able to facilitate good communication, where everybody is working together to take care of our soldiers and their families, then we're going to close the gap in terms of how many people fall through the cracks.
So want to kind of get into the end here. I just wanted to ask you that we're talking a lot about military families and the needs of the service members and their families and their children and spouses. But there are, particularly for young guys who don't have family, they don't have that family in that way, they don't have kids, they may not even be married. Do you work with the parents of the service members to, if they have to deal with a suicide issue, or just generally speaking that they're really worried about what's happening with their son or daughter out in the field? Is that a service that you're able to provide to the civilians?
Certainly, it's been my experience that a lot of times mothers and fathers are concerned because when their son or daughter goes off to join the services, they may have a period of time they don't have contact. And I understand for the service members, a new exciting life, and then I'm not saying it escapes our notice, but we'll receive phone calls at the installation level saying, hey, I think my son and daughter's assigned there. They finished their basic training or advanced individual training. I think they're in such and such battalion. Of course, we hunt down that service member and say, hey, what's up? You should be contacting mom and dad. What kind of son? Yeah, and it's too easy now with smartphones and Skype and all the rest of it. Likewise, we have had family members who have been concerned over potential suicidal individuals, and we have established hotlines in the theaters where they can get a hold of, through the Veterans Administration Suicide Prevention Hotline, get directly to the forward area, and through the chaplains, locate the unit chaplain and get to the service member. Sometimes we've stopped suicides from occurring. Other times it was well-intentioned but not really necessary because family member misread something in an email or communication. So
it's one of those better safe than sorry kinds of things, I would imagine.
Always, and also establish that good relationship with the extended family. So the Army, in its Ready and Resilient campaign, is looking at partners outside the gate in terms of connection with the extended family and what are appropriate that don't involve entitlements in terms of what benefits and services have to be provided, but the appropriate connections, because we are an Army family, and even after your military service, we owe you some support as well as connection with the extended family who, it's still an American public that gives us the sons and daughters, a great trust relationship between the nation and the military that we take very seriously. One of our concerns is, the success of our family ministry and strong bonds sometimes eclipses or overtakes our normal responsibility, which is, of course, provide for the free exercise of religion. And we do that. And then again, the connection of being able to provide for our soldiers' needs spiritually with the delivery of religious support establishes the right kind of environment where they're comfortable with knowing this is what chaplains do and chaplain assistance support. And therefore, that opens the door later when they come to you and say, hey, sir and chaplain and father, can you help me? My wife and I need counseling, or I'm struggling with this in my personal life. Have a difficult supervisor, all the normal things that come with military service or any kind of employment in terms of getting along with others and doing your work.
Chaplain Ken Stice with the U.S. Army, doing really wonderful work. Thank you very much for taking the time and for all the great stuff that you're doing.
Appreciate the privilege to represent our Army and talk about our chaplain corps.